The story of Evelyn Hart did not begin in a boardroom or on a billionaire's yacht. It began in the dust, the fine, glittering dust of 1,000 different fabrics floating in the sunbeams that cut through the window of a small tailor shop in Chicago. Before the world called her a genius, before she learned to build walls around her heart, she was just a girl with wide, curious eyes who believed the stars, if you listened closely, whispered her name through the cracks in the ceiling. Her world was small, defined by the geography of love and lack. It was the cramped apartment above the shop, where the whirring of sewing machines was a constant lullaby, a rhythmic promise that hard work could stitch together a life. The air was perpetually perfumed with the scent of fabric dye, of worn leather, of her mother's lavender hand cream. This was her perfume of dreams. She would lie on the floor, tracing the patterns in the rug, while below the steady thump, thump, thump of the pressing pedal was the heartbeat of her childhood. Her mother, Eleanor, was a woman whose strength was not in her voice, which was always soft but in her hands, hands that were rarely still. They could smooth the most stubborn silk, coax a straight seam from a chaotic bolt of cloth, and gently wipe a tear from her daughter's cheek, all with the same effortless grace. One evening, as Evelyn watched her mother painstakingly piece together a quilt from discarded scraps of suiting wool and floral cotton, she asked why she bothered. The new whole fabrics were right there on the shelf. Her mother didn't look up, her fingers never pausing their dance. Because, my Evie, the world is already full of enough things that are thrown away. Our job, our small little job, is to stitch it back together with something good. She finally looked up, her eyes holding a depth of wisdom that Evelyn would spend a lifetime trying to fathom. Remember that. Don't just wear the cloth, Evelyn. Don't just use it. Make it mean something. At 16, with the stubborn fire of adolescence in her belly and the scent of thread still clinging to her clothes, Evelyn Hart stood in that same shop, looking at her reflection in the dark glass of the front door. She saw not a girl, but a promise, and she made a vow to herself, a silent, solemn oath that felt as permanent as the stitches in the garments around her. She would. She would make it mean something. The years that followed were a blur of ambition and caffeine. While her friends went to parties, Evelyn went to the library. She devoured books on textile science, on business management, on global supply chains. Her first studio was her dorm room, then a drafty garage. Heartline was born not from a desire for wealth, but from that 16-year-old's promise. It was a simple, radical idea. What if beauty didn't have to cost the earth? She sourced discarded materials, plastic bottles woven into silky thread, abandoned fishing nets transformed into durable bags, factory offcuts given a new life. She worked with her hands just like her mother, blisters and calluses becoming her badges of honor. The world, it turned out, was starving for something real, for something with a soul. And Heartline fed it. The ascent was meteoric. Within 5 years, her face was everywhere. It was on billboards in Tokyo, her enigmatic smile looking down on bustling crowds. It was in glossy magazines, her words about circular economies and conscious consumerism, quoted in articles. And then came the pinnacle, the moment of societal coronation, the cover of Forbes. There she was, Evelyn Hart, 29 years old, leaning against a work table in a designer white lab coat, smiling beside the bold, declarative caption, "The youngest billionaire who redefined style." She had arrived. With the wealth came the artifacts of success. She bought the skyscraper in Manhattan, her penthouse a glass castle in the sky. She acquired a private jet, its interior a study in minimalist luxury. She purchased a private island in a turquoise sea, a place of such profound quiet that the silence itself became deafening. Yet, in the echoing halls of her immense homes, a strange paradox took root. Every success, every new acquisition, felt like another brick laid in a beautiful, isolating wall. Every award she held was heavy, not with prestige, but with unspoken expectation. The more she owned, the less she felt she truly possessed anything of value. The more people applauded, the lonelier she became. The applause in her vast, marble-lined boardrooms began to sound indistinct and hollow, like rain falling on an empty glass. Her life became a meticulously choreographed performance. Each morning was a ritual of discipline devoid of joy. Wake at 5 a.m. for a yoga session that stretched her body but did nothing to ease the tightness in her soul. Scroll through 100 emails on a tablet that glowed in the pre-dawn light, each message a demand, a decision, a number. Then, the daily performance. She would stand before her teams and repeat the words that had once been her gospel, but now felt like ash in her mouth. Sustainability, impact, innovation. They were just slogans now, marketing copy for a dream she feared she had sold out. But her evenings were the true test. After the last assistant had left, after the city had settled into its nocturnal hum, she would step onto the balcony of her penthouse, 60 stories above the teeming life of New York. The city would spread out before her, a breathtaking tapestry of a million lights, a man-made constellation of ambition and struggle and dreams. And she would stand there, a queen on her balcony, and feel nothing but a yawning chasm inside. She wondered why these brilliant, shining lights, these stars she had worked so hard to reach, now looked so cold, so distant, so utterly untouchable. Her assistant, Clara, a sharp and perceptive woman who had been with her since the garage days, once found her there, staring into the abyss. "Don't you ever take a vacation, Evelyn?" Clara asked, her voice laced with a concern that professional decorum usually masked. "A real one. Somewhere with no cell service, where no one knows your name." Evelyn turned, a faint, practiced smile already in place, a mask she wore so often it felt like her own skin. "From what, Clara?" she replied, her tone light, effortless, and completely false. "The world doesn't rest. The markets don't close. Neither can I." It was a lie, delivered with the smooth precision of a CEO. But the truth, the one she would never voice aloud, was simpler and far more terrifying. She didn't know where to go. The tailor shop was gone. Her mother passed away years ago. There was no harbour to sail to, no sanctuary waiting. There were only addresses, a penthouse, an island, a jet, all of them empty. One brittle winter evening, as a sleet rain blurred the glass of her balcony doors, a thick cream-coloured envelope arrived among the usual corporate mail. Another charity invitation, another glossy card promising good press and photo opportunities with other beautiful, bored people. She picked it up, her thumb tracing the embossed lettering, ready to toss it into the recycling bin. A gesture of hollow irony for the queen of sustainability. But her hand froze. The name of the charity caught her eye, snagging on a deep, long-buried memory like a thread on a rough edge. The Starlight Children's Clinic. A flood of sense memory washed over her. The smell of antiseptic and strained soup. The feeling of a crisp, starched sheet. The kind, crinkling eyes of a nurse who had brought her a popsicle when she was 7, burning with a fever her mother couldn't afford to treat at a proper hospital. The Starlight Clinic had taken them in. It was a place of kindness in a childhood often defined by scarcity. So, against her every instinct, Evelyn went. The event was a symphony of polished generosity, held in a glittering hotel ballroom. Cameras flashed the moment she stepped out of her car, capturing her every move. She wore a stunning heartline gown made from recycled silver thread, and she moved through the crowd with the easy grace of a predator, smiling her billionaire's smile. Donors clinked glasses filled with champagne that cost more than her mother's first, second-hand sewing machine. She exchanged pleasantries, her mind a million miles away. Then, an older nurse, her face a roadmap of late shifts and quiet compassion, approached her. She didn't ask for a photo or an autograph. She leaned in and whispered, her voice low and sincere. "The real work isn't in here, Miss Hart. It's down the hall. Would you like to see the children?" Something deep within Evelyn, a part of her soul she thought had been paved over with ambition and cynicism, stirred. It was a faint, fragile sound, like a whisper from a great distance. It whispered yes. Down a dim hallway she saw a boy drawing with broken crayons. "What are you making?" she asked. "A jacket," he said, not looking up. "For my mom. So she won't be cold when she comes back." Evelyn felt her throat tighten. That night she returned to her penthouse and opened her mother's old sewing kit, the one she'd kept locked in a drawer for years. The thread had faded, but the memory hadn't. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn began noticing things she had ignored. Workers in her factories underpaid, waste bins overflowing with discarded fabric, board meetings where ethics was just a slide. When she questioned it, her CFO said, "Evelyn, philanthropy doesn't scale. Compassion doesn't compound interest." She dismissed him, but his words echoed. Was that what she'd become? A woman whose kindness had been negotiated away? That night, she watched a news story about refugees sewing tents from torn clothes. A single sentence from the reporter pierced her. "Sometimes the poorest hands do the richest work." She turned off the screen and whispered, "I've lost my mother's voice." The next morning she cancelled her meetings, took the subway for the first time in 10 years, and wandered the streets of Brooklyn in an oversized coat. No chauffeur, no entourage. That's when she saw it. A tiny café with a flickering sign that read, "Second Chance." She went in. Inside, a young man sat in the corner sketching on napkins, muttering to himself. His clothes were worn, his hands stained with graphite. When his pencil snapped, he sighed in defeat. Evelyn, amused, offered him her pen. He hesitated, then took it. For a moment their eyes met. He looked familiar, not his face, but his hunger. The same kind she once carried. "Bad day?" she asked. He smiled. "Just running out of luck, Mom." "What are you drawing?" "An arm," he said, sliding the napkin forward. On it was a crude design of a mechanical limb made of recycled plastic. "It's for kids who lost theirs in accidents," he explained. "I'm trying to make it cheap enough for anyone to build." Evelyn leaned in. "And what's stopping you?" He laughed. "Everything. Materials, patents, money. You name it." She felt a strange pull in her chest, the kind she hadn't felt in years. Before leaving, she asked his name. "Noah," he said. "Noah Grant." She smiled. "Nice to meet you, Noah." "Keep drawing." He looked at her, puzzled. "You really think it's worth it?" She nodded. "More than you know." She left the cafe and walked into the evening fog, heart pounding like she'd just found a missing piece of herself. That night, Evelyn stood again on her balcony, the city stretching beneath her feet. For the first time, she didn't feel above it. She felt small and alive. She opened her mother's sewing kit, threaded a needle, and whispered into the wind. Maybe it's time to stitch something new. The morning after her encounter at the Second Chance Café, Evelyn Hart did not wake with uncertainty. She awoke with a clarity that was as sharp and piercing as a needle. It was a conviction that had been buried under years of quarterly reports and stock valuations, now unearthed by a broken pencil and a young man's unwavering belief. She walked into the Heartline headquarters, a temple of glass and steel that she had built, but she did not enter as its high priestess. She entered as a revolutionary, ready to tear down the idols. She summoned her entire executive team to the 35th floor boardroom. The room was a statement of power, with a monolithic table of polished ebony and floor-to-ceiling windows that presented her empire to her like a general surveying a conquered land. Her team filed in, their faces a mixture of curiosity and routine expectation. They were prepared to discuss market penetration in Asia, the spring collection, the stock buyback program. Evelyn stood with her back to them, looking out at the city. The silence in the room grew thick, punctuated only by the nervous clearing of a throat. We're pivoting, she said, her voice calm, yet it carried an absolute, unshakable finality that made the air itself seem to still. Robert, her CFO, a man who viewed the world through the pristine lens of a balance sheet, was the first to break the tension with a dry chuckle. Another product line, Evelyn? The Hart Humanitarian Collection? The marketing team has some fantastic concepts leveraging our core values. No, she interrupted, turning slowly to face them. Her eyes, usually so guarded, were alight with a fire they hadn't seen since the early days in the garage. We are shutting down production lines 1 through 4, effective immediately. We are recalling all overseas manufacturing contracts that do not meet our new radical wage standards. I'm talking a living wage, not the minimum. And we are reallocating 80% of our current marketing budget into a new venture. The room, once filled with the quiet confidence of immense power, was now frozen in disbelief. It was Robert who found his voice first, a sputter of protest. 80%? Evelyn, that's billions. To what? A new ad campaign. To the Starlight Foundation, Evelyn declared, her gaze sweeping across their stunned faces. And our first project is the Noah Grant Limb. We will manufacture, patent, and distribute a revolutionary, low-cost prosthetic arm, free of charge, to any child in the world who needs one. The uproar was instantaneous, a cacophony of panic. "You'll bankrupt the company," shouted the head of operations. "The shareholders will have us for breakfast," cried the legal counsel. "This is corporate suicide, Evelyn. We have a fiduciary responsibility." Robert slammed his hand on the table, his face flushed with a mixture of anger and fear. "Evelyn, this is insanity. That napkin doodle? From some homeless kid in a coffee shop? You're betting our entire company on a fantasy." Evelyn's gaze locked onto his and her voice dropped to a deadly calm. "His name is Noah Grant. And he has done more with a broken pencil and a core of human decency than this entire room has managed with a 7-figure budget and a moral compass set to 0. The vote is unnecessary. The decision is final." She turned and walked out, the door clicking shut behind her, leaving a vacuum of silence that was quickly filled with the frantic, horrified whispers of a collapsing world. She went straight to the Second Chance Café. Noah was in his usual corner, but the duffel bag at his feet and the hollow look in his eyes told a new story. "My landlord evicted me," he said, not meeting her gaze. "Said my commotion was bad for business. I'm out of options. Out of road." Evelyn sat down opposite him, the scarred wooden table between them feeling like the most important negotiating table in the world. "No," she said, her voice firm. "You're not. My name is Evelyn Hart, and I am going to help you build your arm." Noah stared at her, the name finally connecting in his mind. The billionaire, the fashion icon from the magazines. His mouth fell open. "You're her? But why?" "Because you reminded me what a promise sounds like," she said, her voice softening. "It doesn't whisper from a stock ticker. It doesn't flash on a billboard. It's the sound of a pencil on a napkin refusing to quit. I'm funding it, fully. We'll get you a state-of-the-art lab, a team of the best engineers and orthopedists, whatever you need. There is just one non-negotiable condition." "What?" Noah asked, his voice a mixture of hope and deep-seated wariness. "You lead the project," Evelyn stated. "It stays your vision. You are the architect. I am just the general contractor." The journey began. It was messy, beautiful, glorious chaos. The sleek, minimalist aesthetics of Heartline's top floor R and D wing were suddenly invaded by whiteboards covered in frantic equations, 3D printers humming day and night, and the smell of soldering iron and coffee. Blueprints of mechanical joints and myoelectric sensors were taped over fashion sketches of evening gowns. Evelyn was there, not in a designer suit, but in jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hands once again remembering the feel of raw creation, handing tools, reviewing schematics, asking questions instead of giving orders. In this lab, she wasn't a billionaire. She was a student, a collaborator, a maker. She saw the genius in Noah not as a concept, but in the relentless, focused way he solved problems, his artist's mind merging with an engineer's precision. But outside the sanctity of the lab, the world was not so kind. The news broke like a dam bursting. "Heartline in free fall," screamed one financial network. "Billionaire's guilt-fueled meltdown," proclaimed another. Her stock price began a precipitous plunge, a digital representation of her reputation crumbling in real time. Board members, those who hadn't already resigned in protest, sent her terse, panicked emails. Former friends, the titans of industry she'd clinked glasses with, now called her a traitor to her class, in hushed, scornful tones at their private clubs. The pressure was a physical weight on her shoulders. One night, deep into the early hours, she sat alone in her starkly lit office, surrounded by printouts of the day's devastating headlines. The ghost of Robert's voice echoed in her mind. Philanthropy doesn't scale. For a terrifying moment, she felt the old instincts rise, to retrench, to call a press conference, to announce a strategic retreat, and salvage what was left. Just then, a live video feed from the lab flickered on her monitor. It was Noah. He was kneeling beside a little girl, a Syrian refugee named Lena, who had lost her arm in a bombing. The prototype limb, now a sleek white and elegantly engineered piece of art, was on the table beside them. Noah spoke to her in a soft, gentle voice, explaining each part. He carefully fitted the socket onto her residual limb. Lena's eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and awe, watched his every move. He clicked the final connection. The arm whirred softly to life. A small LED on the wrist glowed blue. "Now, Lena," Noah whispered, "think about picking up your bear." Lena frowned in concentration. The mechanical hand, with its delicate, articulated fingers, twitched, then smoothly opened and closed. It reached out, hovering over the stuffed bear she had brought with her from the camp, the fingers wrapped around its furry body. She lifted it. She held it. A smile so bright and pure it could have powered the entire city broke across her face. She hugged the bear tightly to her chest with her new mechanical arm. Then, overcome with emotion, she turned and threw her other arm around Noah's neck, burying her face in his shoulder. Tears, hot and unchecked, streamed down Evelyn's face in the darkness of her office. This was the real currency. This was the compounding interest of compassion. It was a dividend that paid out in human dignity. She wiped her tears, turned off the negative news feeds, and went back to work. Her resolve was now forged in titanium. But just as the Starlight Foundation was preparing for its global launch, a cold, legalistic problem emerged. A crack in the foundation that threatened to bring the entire dream crashing down. To file the international patents for the Noah Grant limb, their lawyers needed to verify Noah's identity and establish a clear chain of invention for his prior work. It was a standard procedure. Evelyn's high-powered legal team, efficient and thorough, ran a routine background check. What they found sent a chill of pure ice down Evelyn's spine. Noah Grant had no verifiable social security number, no birth certificate on file from any of the 50 states. His educational records were a patchwork of unverifiable correspondences. His entire history, prior to about 5 years ago, was a ghost story. The brilliant, kind, passionate young man she had entrusted with her company, her fortune, and her redemption was a phantom. Robert, the ousted CFO, still with friends in the legal department, got wind of the discrepancy. He saw his chance to reclaim his kingdom. He bypassed the official channels and leaked the story to a notorious venomous gossip site. The headline was designed to destroy "Billionaire Heiress Scammed." Mysterious inventor at heart of Hart's downfall is a convincing fraud. The media frenzy that followed was apocalyptic. The narrative flipped in an instant. She was no longer a misguided visionary, she was a gullible fool. "Who is Noah Grant?" became the screaming headline on every news outlet across the globe. Evelyn, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, went straight to the lab. She found Noah calibrating a sensor array. The printouts from the legal team were crumpled in her fist. "Noah," she said, her voice trembling with a pain she could no longer suppress. "My lawyers. They can't find you. There's no record of you. Who are you?" The colour drained from Noah's face. The look in his eyes was not one of a cunning criminal caught, but of a terrified animal backed into a corner. The fear was real. "Evelyn, I can explain. It's not what you think, but not here. Not now." The shouts of reporters could be heard from the street below. He looked toward the door, then back at her, his expression one of utter anguish. "I'm so sorry." And before she could say another word, before she could stop him, he bolted. He ran out of the lab, down the fire stairs, and disappeared into the bowels of the city, leaving behind his tools, his prototypes, and the shattered pieces of her faith. Evelyn was left standing alone in the silent, sterile lab. The dream lay in ruins around her, the whirring printers now sounding like a dirge. The world's laughter was a palpable force, mocking her naivety. She had gambled everything, her company, her reputation, her newfound purpose, on a beautiful lie. She returned to her penthouse, the vast emptiness more profound and chilling than ever before. She had tried to stitch the world back together, and the thread, it seemed, had not just snapped, it had never been real to begin with. Weeks bled into months. The scandal, like all scandals, eventually lost its white-hot heat, replaced by newer, fresher tragedies for the world to consume. Heartline was systematically dismantled, its valuable parts sold off to competitors by vulture funds. Evelyn Hart became a recluse, a ghost in the narrative she had once dominated. She avoided the penthouse with its mocking views of a city that had rejected her redemption arc. Instead, she spent her days in the one place that still held the echo of truth, her mother's old tailor shop. She had bought the building years ago, preserving it like a museum exhibit to her own past. Now she inhabited it. Dust motes danced in the same sunbeams. The old mechanical sewing machines sat silent under cloth covers. She would run her fingers over the shelves of thread, the drawers of buttons, trying to feel for a vibration, a memory, a clue to where she had gone so wrong. One afternoon, driven by a quiet desperation, she decided to finally open a cardboard box she had avoided for years. It was labelled Eleanor's Personal in her mother's elegant script. Inside were faded photo albums filled with pictures of a smiling young woman she barely recognised as her mother, and bundles of letters tied with ribbon. At the very bottom, tucked away as if hidden, was a sealed envelope, its paper yellowed and brittle with age. It was addressed to her mother. The return address was a P.O. box in a small, insignificant town in Kansas she had never heard of. The postmark was blurred, but the year was clear, 32 years ago. With a sense of trepidation that made her hands shake, Evelyn carefully sliced the envelope open. The letter inside was written in a strong, elegant masculine hand. "My dearest Eleanor," it began. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Her mother's name, Eleanor. "I write this with a heart so full of regret and hope that I fear it may stop beating. I cannot leave my family, as you know. The society we live in, the expectations, they would crucify us both. They would never understand a love like ours. But the child, our son, I have arranged for him to be cared for. A private adoption, discreet and safe. He will be given a new name, my mother's maiden name, Grant. They will tell him he was an orphan, that his parents were lost. It is the only way I know to protect him, and to protect you from the ruin that would follow. Please, my love, find a way to forgive me. He will never know he has a sister. He will never know that his name, his true name, should have been Hart. The letter was signed not with a full name, but with a single looping initial, H. Evelyn's world did not just tilt. It shattered and reassembled itself in an entirely new, terrifying and heartbreaking configuration. The air left her lungs in a rush. She slumped into her mother's old chair, the letter fluttering from her numb fingers. A son. A brother. Her mother had had a son before her, a secret child, born of a forbidden love, given away to protect them all. His name. The name given to him was Grant. Noah Grant. It wasn't a scam. It wasn't a lie born of malice. It was a family secret, a tragic thread from the past, pulling them together across decades. The familiarity she had seen in his eyes in that café wasn't just a shared hunger or a common drive. It was shared blood. The same fire, the same innate need to create and to mend, passed down from their mother. He wasn't a stranger. He was her brother. He had run not because he was a fraud, but because he was afraid. Afraid of his own past. Afraid of the truth. Afraid of being rejected once he was discovered as a man with no history. The hunt that followed was different. It wasn't a corporate investigation. It was a pilgrimage. She used the last of her personal resources, not for business, but for family. She hired a discreet, compassionate private investigator. The trail was cold, but the clue of the Kansas town was the key. They tracked a digital footprint, a bus ticket purchased with cash, a library computer login to that very town. Without a second thought, Evelyn booked a commercial flight, something she hadn't done in over a decade. She found him in the town's only public library, a dusty, quiet building that smelled of old paper and floor wax. He was at a computer terminal in the reference section, his shoulders hunched, scrolling through online job listings for mechanical engineers. He looked thinner, exhausted, the light in his eyes dimmed to a faint ember of defeat. He looked up as her shadow fell over the keyboard. Fear, shame, and a flicker of desperate hope flashed in his eyes. "Evelyn," he breathed, starting to stand, ready to run again. "I'm so sorry. I was going to find a way to tell you, I didn't know how." "I know," she whispered, her voice thick with an emotion so profound it had no name. She didn't reach for him. Instead, she slowly, carefully placed the old yellowed letter on the table in front of him. Noah looked down. His hands, those brilliant stained hands, began to shake as he read. He read it once, then again, slower, his breath hitching. The truth, a truth decades older than both of them, settled over the silent library, a blanket of understanding and shared grief. He wasn't a fraud, he was a heart. He had always been a heart. He looked up at Evelyn and for the first time, through the tears welling in his own eyes, he saw it. The same curve of the jaw, the same shape of the brow, their mother's unmistakable spirit looking back at him. "She used to say," Evelyn began, a single tear tracing a clean path through the dust on her cheek, "stitch the world together with something good." Noah finished the sentence, his voice cracking under the weight of a recovered memory. "Don't just wear it. Make it mean something." He looked down at his hands, then back at her, his expression one of bewildered awe. "She told me that. The social worker said it was the only thing the woman at the orphanage said I should know about my mother. I thought I'd imagined the voice. I thought I'd made it up to comfort myself." They didn't move for a long moment. Then, as if pulled by an invisible force, they stepped into each other's arms. It was not a dramatic embrace, but a quiet, desperate clinging. Two halves of a whole, two lonely stars who had been orbiting the same black hole of loss, finally finding their constellation in each other. They held on as the dust motes danced around them, in a small-town library finally coming home. They returned to the world, but not as a disgraced billionaire and an accused fraud. They returned as siblings, as a family. They chose to hold their press conference not in a sterile corporate boardroom, but at the Starlight Children's Clinic, surrounded by the children who were the reason for it all. Evelyn stood at the simple podium, Noah standing firmly by her side. Cameras flashed, but this time the energy was different, charged with a palpable curiosity. "The world has called me many things," Evelyn began, her voice clear and strong, devoid of its former artifice. "A genius, a billionaire, a fool. But the only title that ever truly mattered was the first one I was ever given, my mother's daughter. Today I stand here as that. And I stand beside my brother, Noah Grant Hart, our mother's son." The room erupted in a collective gasp, then fell into a stunned, absolute silence, broken only by the whir of cameras. "Heartline, as the world knew it, is gone," Evelyn continued, a sense of peace settling on her features. "But from its ashes, we are building something new. The Starlight Foundation will not be a charity. It will be a new kind of company, a company where compassion does compound, where empathy has a return on investment that is measured in human lives, where every product, every innovation is designed not for profit, but for people. The Noah Grant limb is not our end goal. It is just our beginning. The story, with its incredible Shakespearean twist of fate and family, swept across the globe like a wildfire. It was no longer a story of a fall from grace. It was a phoenix-like rise to humanity. The very investors who had once fled now clamoured to be part of this new, authentic and morally resonant mission. The media that had mocked her now celebrated her as a visionary, a pioneer of a new, heart-led capitalism. 1 year later, Evelyn and Noah stood together on a simple open-air stage in a field on the outskirts of the city. Below them, under a bright, sun-drenched sky, were hundreds of children. They were running, playing, laughing. And on many of them, the sleek white prosthetic arms were not devices of limitation, but tools of possibility. A child threw a ball, another built a tower of blocks, a little girl braided her friend's hair. They were not recipients of charity. They were living, breathing, joyful proof of a new possibility. Evelyn looked at her brother, Noah, who was smiling, his face finally free of the fear and hunger that had once defined it. She then looked out at the sea of joyful, hopeful faces. She no longer listened for the whispers of the distant, untouchable stars. She simply felt their light, warm, and constant, on her skin. She had finally, truly, stitched her world back together. Not with money, or power, or fame, but with a single, simple, powerful act of kindness that had, in the most mysterious and beautiful way imaginable, led her home.